Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Crimson by me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, Tiger Supervisor. Today, we are doing Chapter 4. Alex wondered if screaming at the screen might help. Should be wood. Nah. Yeah, you know what? Would help. Would help. Not screaming at the node, he knew that, never produced anything, but just at the screen. He'd taken out his earpiece and was rubbing his temple. This was proving a lot more complicated than it anticipated. Despite, why is this highlighted? Oh, wow. Okay, I'm surprised this slipped through the editor. Despite the simple task, the problem was that he couldn't dedicate a large block of time to tracking down the information on Tristan. Coercion was a sustained process. It was why, when he was given a target, he had to stick with it until it was done. A stubborn system could easily take half an hour before it gave up its information, and all Alex had was, at most, 10 minutes between assignments before he automatically received a new target. There was his lunchtime. He had an hour then, but company policy stated he couldn't be at his station during that time. The company wanted productive workers, not people who drove themselves to be not people who drove themselves to an early grave by always working. If he were still at his station, one of the supervisors would be advised by the system and they'd come check. If he was, it's all in participle past, I think it's called. If he were finishing work on an attack, they'd remind him to take his lunch as soon as he was done. If he wasn't, his access would be cut, and he'd be told to go take his lunch. He'd seen it happen to more than one employee who thought they could get ahead by overworking themselves. He couldn't afford to be discovered. The idea that he might end up back in that room because of that had kept him from spending too much time on this, and was what frustrated him. For the last 2 weeks, he'd been trying to figure out a method to insert a command line here and there in such a way that it wouldn't be detected during the system regular health check. He'd worked out a handful of possibilities and tested them on systems minor enough no one would care about the alarm they raised if they detected the alteration, which invariably they did. System health was a serious matter. Even minor computer had robust immune system, and major computer had immune system so strong that it could undo an attack in seconds if given the chance. So he hadn't been able to track down where the information was during the snippet of time he could devote to that task, but he did gain a sense of who was hiding it, or rather, what was. Suspected it was a program and not a person doing the work. Even the best coercionist didn't have the reaction time and thoroughness he was seeing. He picked up a trail during a break, figured out the node it led to, then, when he returned to it between assignments, all traces of both the node and the trail's work would be gone. Completely removed, not even a signature left behind, something coercionists were notorious for doing, even when they didn't want to. Even Alex did it, and the company had spent a week training him and the others not to do it. It was something ingrained too deeply in them. He was going through yet another of what he felt was a waste of time, following a trail, pushing how long he worked on this rather than his assigned task, in the hopes that this time would be the one that yielded results, but no, it wouldn't. In the back of his mind, he thought it was time for something more direct, more forceful, like taking control of the Luminex system after work hours and doing this from home. But if he was caught doing that gray room would be the least of his problem. Mr. Crimson, a stern woman's voice rose Alex. He glanced down the corner of his screen, and there was a notification about his next target. As he watched, it went from blinking green to yellow, indicating he was noticeably late in starting. He did his best to appear calm as he turned. He was sweating, and his blood ran cold when he saw her. What was she doing here? She was security. At least he noticed her gaze was fixed on him, not the screen. So she hadn't noticed he hadn't been working on the assigned target. Yes? His voice cracked. Her mouth was tight and her face hard. Mr. Carson wants to see you. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place it. As nervous as he was, he had trouble remembering his own last name. Thought about asking, but the anger in her eyes kept him silent. Maybe that was her boss. Maybe she'd been demoted for what she did to him. But if security had been brought in to deal with him, then he was done for. His unapproved work would cost him his job, possibly his freedom. Strangely enough, as he stood to follow her, he realized that being fired didn't cause the same fear that had before, and that the idea of losing his freedom only angered him because he wouldn't be able to continue his search for Tristan and Jack. He promised himself that if it came to that, he'd run. He'd find a way to look for the Somalian from the fringes of society. The elevator went up instead of down, and he found he breathed easier. He didn't know where the head of security had his office, but he knew the room he'd been kept in was below the building. His nervousness returned when the elevator went past the 20th floor. Everything above that was executive offices. Even the head of the security wouldn't be considered an executive, would he? Alex had never gone above the 8th floor before, and now Alex was so much higher that he was in a world he'd only heard rumors of. Executive didn't mingle with the common coercionist. If they wanted something, their instructions passed down through dozens, hundreds of others before it reached the assigning system. The only reason he could think of going this high was that the lawyers were getting involved. That could only mean the company wasn't happy dealing with him internally. They were going to make an example of him. They were going to turn him over to government law and press charges in the public. The elevator stopped and Alex couldn't move. He thought he was ready for this. When Sheed showed up to get in, he settled on a plan. But now he was in the middle of it. Now that he was in the middle of it, his courage vanished. Move it, she said, making him jump. He looked up as he exited and caught sight of the floor number 85. He was on the building's top floor. As far as he knew, there was only one person that mattered on this floor, the company president. She led him through a corridor without doors, and Alex noticed a faint scorch mark on the walls. The only door that was at the end of the hall, and as he got closer, the name became legible. Amaryl Carson, present. The door opened to a reception area with 2 chairs against a wall and an assuming desk with a well-dressed man seated behind it. In a hollow of a nature scene with the trees swaying in the wind and the clouds drifting lazily in the sky. The 3 of them remained unmoving for a moment that felt like an eternity to Alex. Finally, the receptionist looked at his interrogator. It's okay, Chief. I'll take it from here. Alex saw her tighten and she turned to leave, but she paused to glare at him. We're not done, she whispered. Alex felt like telling her to take him with her as the door closed. The receptionist waited for a moment, then nodded to himself. He's expecting you, Mr. Crimson. Please go in. Alex straightened his shirt before crossing the room, worked his hand on his pants as the door opened for him. He forced confidence in his step as he entered a modest room with shelves lining the wall. There were no books on them, just objects, things the company made, guessed, although there were here and there he saw rocks and crystals. The door closed behind him, and he was able to keep from jumping. You wanted to see me, sir? Was she surprised? Alex's voice didn't crack. He had a shock when he recognized the man seated behind the desk as the one who had come to the cubicle and shaken his hand. He now wore a white suit, leaning back in his chair, and studied Alex. He looked much more imposing seated than he had standing. Alex realized the feeling came because this man now literally held Alex's life in his hand. What Alex didn't understand was why he was doing this personally. This man couldn't be bothered to fire a lowly coercionist, could he? He had an entire department to take care of that. The man indicated one of the 2 large chairs facing him. Please, take a seat. Alex did what he was told. What other choice did he have? You didn't disobey the company president. Hell, you didn't normally meet him during your entire working life. Now, Alex had met him twice. Not for the trouble he was in, he'd be a star among the other coercionists, if not the whole of the lower floors. First off, Mr. Crimson, I'd like to know how you've been doing since coming back to work. His voice was deeper, gruffer than Alex remembered. Alex stammered, I'm okay. He didn't know what else to say. He hadn't expected that question. And how he felt about the company wasn't simple anymore. He was grateful to have a job, but he felt betrayed by the way he'd been treated. Has everyone been treating you well? Yes, sir. After all, they just think I was in the hospital. The sarcasm dripped off his tone. The man before him squirmed, which surprised Alex. But it also pleased a part of him. It also pleased a part of him he didn't realize he had. A vindictive part. I'm glad no one has caused you any trouble. And please, call me Emerald. Alex startled. First name basis? What was going on? Hesitated. All right, Emerald. The man smiled a pained smile and sighed. I want to apologize for how you were treated. You should never have been treated like a criminal. I know this happened to you under the previous administration and that my words aren't going to change what happened. But I want you to know that the people responsible have been punished. How they treated you is horrible. The company is here to look after its employee, not incarcerate them. We're supposed to be a family. Alex nodded, more out of reflex than anything else. He'd believed that at one time, before he'd been locked into that gray room, forced to in that chair. Now he no longer felt part of this family. He felt and was watched, observed, felt cared for and nurtured. When he spoke, Alex was surprised at the civility in his tone. Thank you, sir. But why am I here? He'd been so sure he was here of what he was so sure why he was here when he'd entered, but the apology didn't fit that. I mean, I do appreciate the concern, but you're the president. You have better things to do than see to my hurt feelings. Alex thought he saw pain in the man's face, but before he could be certain, it was neutral again. Alex, I'm not the type of person who sits above his employees apart from them. Like I said, we are a family, and I never want to be seen as too busy to take time to make sure everyone is cared for, he sighed. Which is why I wish you'd come to me. It's been brought to my attention that you've been using company resources to illegally infiltrate and coerce outside systems. Alex looked away. There it was. He'd finally find out what his punishment was. Do you have anything to say? The tone wasn't as sharp as Alex expected. What could he say? What he'd done was illegal, and he'd known it was. Couldn't claim ignorance. Like everyone else, he got the refresher course about how coercion, but a company approval was a major offense. Alex looked at this man, the president of the company who had imprisoned him, treated him like a criminal. And he thought about lying. He didn't. Alex didn't want to be that kind of man. He was angry, but he pushed that down. This man hadn't done any of it, taking the position during his imprisonment. For Alex knew, he had ordered his release, and the way Emerald looked at him now was more sorrow, not sternness. I'm sorry, sir. I had to find out more. I need to understand him, to figure out why he did this, why he did it to me, how he could even bring himself to do it. I've tried at home, but there isn't anything on the open net. It's been scraped, scraped, scraping, scrapping, scrapped. Okay, it is a proper spelling. Looks wrong to me. I thought that with the company system, I'd be able to find what I needed. Sure, I couldn't find anything. This is about Tristan, isn't it? Alex nodded. I've been accused of being his accomplice, when in reality he used me. He brought Jack into my life, made me fall in love with him. Thought that if I had more information about him, I could figure out how he did it, how he fooled me. Do you understand the kind of danger you put the company in? Yes, sir. Alex with his feet. I'm sorry. They were silent for a time, then Emerald slid a data chip across his desk. What is it? It's what you're looking for. All the information on the mercenary and criminal named Tristan. Alex reached for it, but stopped himself. This was too good to be true. Why? He asked suspiciously. Because you're an employee who was wronged by my company. I owe you reparation. For this incident, you were a valued worker, and I want you to continue working here. I want you to give me the chance to show you the company is still your family, but I can't afford you to put us at risk. If you take this chip, I want you to promise that you will cease all unauthorized coercion. Alex's disbelief fought to remain. He'd been so certain his job was gone, possibly also his freedom when he'd been taken here. Now, instead, he was offered the answers to his questions, and the price was simply that he stopped looking for them illegally. He searched Emerald's face, not that he was any good at reading people, but thought the man was sincere. Alex reached for the chip. Alexander, are you certain you want to see what's on that chip? He hurt you, but that is the least of the horrible things Tristan has done in his criminal career. What is on that chip isn't pretty. I understand you need to know him, but please consider the ramification. His finger was on the chip, but he didn't take it. He did what Emerald asked. How badly did he want to know? Did he care what happened after that? The answer came easily. He took the chip. You have my word, sir, that from now on I will only coerce the systems I am assigned to by the company. But to the chip. Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. Emerald looked at Alex, and the sadness in those eyes was deep. Alexander, take your time with this. Don't worry about coming to work. Focus on coming to terms with what was done to you. I'll make sure your apartment is paid for. I'll see to it you can afford food. Take care of yourself, and when you are ready, come back to us. Alex nodded. He didn't understand why this man, the boss of his bosses, was doing this. This was more than compensation for being wrong by the company, so much more. But Alex didn't press. He had what he wanted. What the president of the company was giving it to him didn't matter. And even though part of him was curious, he didn't want to risk losing what he had by probing into it. Alex stood. Thank you, sir. He offered his hand. If you don't mind, I'm going to take you up on that right now and go home. Emerald shook his hand. Please be careful, Alexander. Alex nodded and laughed. This concludes Chapter 4 of Crimson. If you are enjoying this, leave a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the whole of the book as well as the other in the series, they are available on all major e-retailers. You can find a link in the notes as well as the one to my Patreon should you want to support me, and my Twitch should you want to watch me read these live or other stories, depending when you get to this, as well as write some of my stories. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.